As we get older, keeping our mind sharp becomes just as important as keeping our body strong. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you went there? Or struggled to recall a name that used to come easily? You're not alone. And the good news is, the foods we eat can make a real difference. In today's video, we're diving into 5 powerful brain-boosting foods that every senior should consider adding to their daily meals. These aren't trendy health fads. They're everyday foods backed by real science and real stories from real people. From a simple bowl of oats that fuels your mind all morning to a golden spice that may actually help protect your memory, we'll walk through each one, why it matters, and how you can enjoy it easily at home. This video is especially for seniors, caregivers, or anyone looking to age with strength, clarity, and independence. If that sounds like you or someone you love, stick around. You might be surprised by what's sitting in your pantry right now. And don't just watch, we want to hear from you. What foods have helped you feel more focused or energized? Have you tried any of the ingredients we mentioned today? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your tip might help someone else watching. If you're passionate about senior health, practical food tips for elders, and simple advice that makes a real difference, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a new one. Now, let's take care of that beautiful brain of yours, starting with what's on your plate. Let's get into it. 5 oats. It was just another chilly morning in Ohio when Margaret, 73, sat by her kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee. The early sunlight spilled across her small round table, highlighting the bowl of oats in front of her. It wasn't a fancy breakfast, just simple whole oats with a drizzle of honey, a few blueberries, and a splash of almond milk. But to Margaret, it had become something of a ritual, not just for her body, but for her mind. "I used to forget the little things," she told her daughter one afternoon. "Where I placed my glasses, the name of someone I had just met. It frustrated me." Margaret had always been sharp, the kind of woman who never forgot birthdays and always had a crossword puzzle half finished on her nightstand. So when small lapses began to show up more often, she started to worry. Her doctor gently explained it wasn't unusual. Many seniors experience something called brain fog as they age. It's not dementia, but a kind of mental sluggishness, trouble focusing, slower recall, sometimes even a sense of detachment. But there were things she could do to help. One of the easiest changes? Start with breakfast. Whole oats, her doctor said, were more powerful than she realized. They're not just good for the heart, they're great for the brain. Oats help keep blood sugar levels stable throughout the day. That's important, especially for older adults, because sudden spikes and crashes in blood sugar can leave you feeling foggy, fatigued, or even anxious. The slow-digesting carbohydrates in oats provide a steady stream of energy, helping the brain stay alert and focused without the crash that often comes after sugary cereals or white bread toast. And it wasn't just the carbs. Margaret learned that oats are packed with B vitamins, especially B1, thiamine, B5, pantothenic acid, and folate, all of which support the nervous system and brain function. These vitamins play key roles in the creation of neurotransmitters, the chemicals that carry signals between your brain and body. Without enough B vitamins, that communication slows down and thinking clearly becomes harder. Fiber was another hidden gem in her breakfast bowl. The soluble fiber in oats, called beta-glucan, not only helps lower cholesterol, but also nourishes the gut. And Margaret was surprised to learn that gut health is strongly linked to brain health. The two systems talk to each other constantly. A healthy gut can support a healthier, more balanced mind. As the weeks passed, Margaret noticed subtle changes. She was less tired in the afternoons. Her thoughts felt more organized, and her memory seemed sharper. She began pairing her oats with a short morning walk around the neighborhood. Fresh air and movement seemed to amplify the effect. Some days she would add sliced bananas, other times a handful of walnuts or flax seeds. She'd even tried steel-cut oats once, simmered overnight in a slow cooker with cinnamon and apples. Tasted like dessert, she laughed. But it was never about flavor alone. For Margaret, eating oats became an act of care, a quiet way of saying to herself, I still matter. My mind still matters. She told her neighbor Harold about it, a retired high school teacher who often complained about mental fatigue. I'm too old to be sharp, he'd joke. But after a few weeks of joining Margaret for breakfast once or twice a week, Harold admitted something felt different. He was reading again, long novels, like he used to, and enjoying them. He even remembered the names of the characters. This simple change sparked more conversations at their senior center. A few others began experimenting with different breakfast routines. Some stuck with eggs, others tried smoothies, but many came back to oats. They were affordable, easy to prepare, gentle on older stomachs, and could be made savory or sweet. Plus, they were comforting, like a warm hug on a cold morning. Margaret's granddaughter once asked her, Grandma, do you really think oats are magic? She smiled and said, No, sweetheart, not magic, just wise. At her age, wisdom mattered more than ever, not just in what you say, but in how you live, how you nourish your body and mind, and how you choose to show up for yourself each day. Now, every morning when Margaret stirs her oats, she isn't just making breakfast. She's creating a small, sacred moment, a daily reminder that even in older age, the brain is still hungry for nutrients, for consistency, for kindness. So if you found yourself feeling a little foggy, a little off balance, or just plain forgetful, don't dismiss it as just age. Start with something simple, something warm, something like a bowl of oats. You might be surprised at what your brain can do when it's finally given the steady fuel it's been asking for all along. Because the truth is, brain health doesn't come from big changes. It comes from the small, intentional choices we make every day. And sometimes it begins with a spoon. 4. Pumpkin seeds. It started with a small glass jar on the edge of Eleanor's kitchen counter. Nothing fancy, just a repurposed jam jar filled to the top with tiny green seeds. She kept it next to her tea bags, right between the honey and the pepper grinder. Just a pinch a day, she'd remind herself, as if she were following an old family tradition. But this wasn't about superstition. It was about clarity, calm, and caring for her 78-year-old brain. Eleanor had always been sharp, but lately she'd felt herself getting flustered more easily. She couldn't find the right words mid-conversation, or she'd forget why she walked into a room. She even noticed her mood swinging more than usual, feeling low or anxious for no real reason. It didn't feel like her. That's when she started reading more about how food could support brain health. And one thing kept popping up again and again: pumpkin seeds. Tiny, humble, and often overlooked pumpkin seeds, or pepitas, as some call them, are packed with magnesium, zinc, and iron. Eleanor was surprised to learn how essential these minerals are for her aging brain. Magnesium, for one, is like a calming balm for the nervous system. It helps regulate neurotransmitters and can ease anxiety. At her age, with the world spinning fast and memories sometimes feeling out of reach, that kind of inner calm wasn't just nice, it was necessary. Then there was zinc. Most people associate it with immune health, but Eleanor discovered it plays a key role in communication between brain cells. A lack of zinc, especially in older adults, has been linked to poor memory and foggy thinking. Iron, too, was crucial. It helps transport oxygen through the blood, and the brain is one of the most oxygen-hungry organs we have. Without enough iron, the mind can feel sluggish, like a radio struggling to stay tuned to the right station. Eleanor didn't need convincing after that. She began by sprinkling a spoonful over her morning yogurt, tangy Greek style with a swirl of honey and some chopped figs. The seeds added a slight crunch and an earthy flavor that she grew to love. Sometimes she tossed them into her lunchtime salad or kept a small bag in her purse to snack on during her afternoon walks. Better than potato chips, she joked to her friend Joan. What surprised her the most wasn't just how easy they were to incorporate into her day. It was how much better she began to feel after a few weeks. Her mood lifted subtly but noticeably. She didn't feel as overwhelmed by small problems. She was sleeping more soundly. Her thoughts came easier during her weekly book club discussions. Nothing dramatic, but enough for her to feel like herself again. She even began using pumpkin seeds as part of her worry ritual. Whenever she found herself overthinking, especially before bed, she'd sit in her favorite chair, light a lavender candle, nibble a small handful of seeds, and write a line or two in her journal. It was calming, grounding, a small act of nourishment, both for body and spirit. Her grandson, curious about her new snack, asked her why she didn't just take supplement. "I could," she said, "but food speaks to the body in a language it understands." He smiled, not fully getting it, but appreciating her answer anyway. The truth is, there's something deeply satisfying about caring for yourself in such a tangible, natural way. Eleanor believed in medicine, sure, but she also believed in listening to your body's quiet needs, the ones that ask for balance, comfort, and a little bit of daily kindness. The more she read, the more she realized how many older adults were missing out on these small but mighty seeds. Many of her friends were struggling with low energy, stress, even mild depression, and no one thought to look in their snack bowls. But pumpkin seeds weren't just for health nuts or young yoga influencers. They were timeless, easy to chew, easy to digest, and inexpensive, the perfect addition to any senior's kitchen. Eleanor eventually made it a habit to gift small jars of roasted pumpkin seeds to her neighbors. She'd wrap them in a ribbon and leave a little card. "For your heart and mind. Love, Eleanor." Some thought was sweet. Others, like her friend Carl, started asking where she bought them so they could restock when they ran out. Looking back, Eleanor couldn't pinpoint exactly when things changed. There wasn't a magic switch, but she knew that something as small as a seed had made a big difference. It reminded her of something her mother used to say when she was a girl. "Take care of the little things, and the big things will take care of themselves." That, she thought, might be the most senior advice of all. So now, every day without fail, Eleanor reaches for that small jar by her tea. Not because she's worried or chasing youth, but because she's honoring the mind she's carried through decades of life. One seed at a time. 3. Turmeric. Every morning around 6:30, just before the sun spilled through the lace curtains in her kitchen, Margaret began her quiet ritual. The kettle would hum. The teaspoon would clink against the sides of her favorite ceramic mug, and that familiar golden powder, turmeric, would swirl gently into the warm water, releasing its earthy scent. A touch of honey, a squeeze of lemon, and sometimes a tiny pinch of black pepper. It was a peaceful beginning, but for Margaret, it was also deeply purposeful. At 74, Margaret had started noticing small changes. Misplaced keys, forgotten names, moments when the thread of a thought slipped right through her fingers. Nothing alarming, but enough to make her wonder what she could do to protect the mind she'd spent decades using to raise children, write poetry, and win Sunday crossword puzzles. She didn't want to just get by in her later years. She wanted to stay mentally sharp and emotionally balanced. That's when she stumbled upon turmeric. She had read that the bright yellow spice, used for centuries in Indian cooking and Ayurvedic medicine, contained a compound called curcumin. What fascinated her wasn't just the ancient wisdom, but the modern science catching up to it. Curcumin, she learned, has a rare ability. It can cross the blood-brain barrier. That's the body's highly selective shield that protects the brain from toxins, but also blocks many helpful compounds. Curcumin makes it through, and once it's in, it gets to work. Inflammation, scientists say, is a major culprit in cognitive decline. Margaret had never thought about her brain being inflamed, but the concept made sense. If joints could swell and ache with age, why not brain cells? Curcumin helps soothe that inflammation, and even more impressively, it encourages the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports the growth of new neurons. For Margaret, that sounded like hope in a teaspoon. There is even research showing that turmeric could improve memory and mood, especially in older adults. One study she found involved seniors who took a curcumin supplement daily and saw noticeable improvements in their ability to remember details and focus. Some even reported feeling less anxious or blue. Margaret thought about her friend Edna, who had recently lost her husband and often said she felt like she was walking through fog. Maybe turmeric could offer not just clarity, but comfort too. Of course, Margaret knew she wasn't going to rely on turmeric alone. She still walked every day, ate her greens, and played word games religiously. But turmeric became her little anchor. Some days she used the powdered form in cooking, stirred into scrambled eggs, or dusted over roasted vegetables. Other times, when she didn't feel like the earthy taste, she took it in capsule form with her morning vitamins. But most often, she returned to her favorite version, turmeric tea with honey and lemon. Warm, simple, and soothing to the soul. She even began sharing the habit with her bridge group. At first, they raised their eyebrows. "Is this one of your fancy health potions again?" her friend Rita joked. But when Rita tried the tea herself and started sleeping better and feeling more alert, she asked Margaret for the recipe. Soon enough, turmeric became a standing joke at their table. "Don't mess with Margaret," they'd say. "She's got curcumin power now." Margaret didn't care about fads or flashy supplements. What she cared about was feeling like herself, present, clear, connected. In the afternoons, when she sat down to write in her journal, she noticed she was less likely to lose her train of thought. On her evening calls with her granddaughter, she could follow the winding stories and remember the names of all the new classmates she mentioned. She even started writing poems again, ones that didn't just make sense, but made her smile. It wasn't magic. Margaret knew that, but she believed in the cumulative power of small, consistent choices. A quiet morning tea, a sprinkle in her stew, a daily act of caring for her brain, just as she had once cared for her children's scraped knees and bruised hearts. Aging, she realized, wasn't about fading, it was about finding new ways to flourish. One day, her grandson asked what the yellow stain on her wooden spoon was from. "Turmeric," she replied, smiling. "That little stain? That's the mark of sharp mind." And she meant it, because to Margaret, that spoon wasn't just stained, it was seasoned. Like her, seasoned by time, softened by experience, and still bright with wisdom. 2 walnuts. It started with a simple swap in Harold's routine. At 72, he'd always reached for a cookie or two with his mid-morning coffee, an old habit from his working days. But one afternoon, while visiting his daughter, he saw her scooping a handful of walnuts into a bowl for her snack. "Keeps my brain sharp," she said with a wink. Harold chuckled at first, but something about it stuck with him. He'd always prided himself on his memory. He could still recite his wedding vows from 50 years ago and name every player on a 1965 Yankees roster. But lately, he'd found himself walking into rooms and forgetting why. He'd lose his train of thought mid-sentence or struggle to recall the name of a neighbor he'd known for years. It wasn't alarming, but it was frustrating. So he decided to try something different. At the grocery store that week, he tossed a small bag of walnuts into his cart. Not the salted or sugar-coated kind, just plain raw walnuts. He wasn't quite sure what to do with them first, but soon they became part of his day. Every morning, after pouring his coffee, he'd grab a handful and sit by the window, munching slowly and watching the world wake up. What surprised him wasn't just how tasty they were, rich, slightly bitter with a satisfying crunch, but how they made him feel. Not in a flashy, immediate way, but subtly like something inside him was recalibrating. Over time, Harold noticed he wasn't struggling for words as often. His thoughts felt less foggy. He could read the newspaper without rereading the same paragraph 3 times. He did a little digging, curious about what was in those wrinkled little nuts. Turns out, walnuts are packed with omega-3 fatty acids, the same kind you find in salmon, known to fight inflammation and support brain health. But that wasn't all. They also contain polyphenol, powerful antioxidants that protect brain cells from damage. It made sense. Aging brains, after all, face a constant battle with oxidative stress, and these little guys were like tiny brain shields. Harold liked that idea, a shield for his mind. There was even research backing it up. Some studies showed that older adults who ate walnuts regularly performed better on memory tests than those who didn't. Others suggested walnuts could support better reasoning, concentration, and even mood. Harold wasn't aiming to become a genius at 72, but if a snack could help him remember where he put his glasses or keep up with his grandkids' stories, that was enough. He started experimenting. Crushed walnuts on oatmeal, a few tossed into a salad, even baking them into homemade muffins with a touch of cinnamon, his wife's favorite. They fit so easily into his life, and unlike cookies, they didn't spike his blood sugar or leave him feeling sluggish. In fact, they gave him a steady kind of energy that lasted through the day. His friends at the local community center started noticing, too. "You're looking sharper than ever, Harold," one of them joked during chess club. He smiled, tapping the side of his head. "It's the walnuts," he said. They laughed, but a week later, he saw a few of them pulling out snack bags of their own. It wasn't just about memory anymore. Harold felt more in control, more present. His daily walnut habit became a symbol of something bigger, a quiet commitment to himself. He made peace with the fact that aging came with changes. But he also realized that small choices made every day could stack up to something powerful. He even got a little creative with it. On his granddaughter's birthday, he made her a card shaped like a walnut. Inside, he wrote, "Just like your grandpa, tough on the outside, full of good stuff on the inside." She laughed and gave him a hug, and in that moment, he felt sharper than ever. Years later, Harold still keeps a glass jar of walnuts on his kitchen counter, right next to the coffee pot, right where he can see them. They're not just food to him. They're a daily reminder that no matter how old you are, there's always something you could do to nourish your mind, one bite at a time. 1. Fatty fish. Every Sunday, Carol would visit the farmer's market downtown. At 68, she had a soft spot for tradition, and strolling through the stalls of fresh produce and chatting with familiar faces gave her a sense of calm she couldn't quite explain. But it wasn't just about the fruits and vegetables. A few years ago, she started making a deliberate stop at the fish stall, where a friendly man named Pete sold wild-caught salmon, sardines, and mackerel packed on ice. It all began after a conversation with her doctor. Carol had gone in for a routine checkup and casually mentioned that she'd been forgetting small things, like why she opened the fridge or the name of an actress she loved. Her doctor, who always preferred food over pills, had smiled and asked, "How often are you eating fatty fish?" She admitted it wasn't much, maybe once a month, if that. "Try 2 or 3 times a week," he said. "Your brain will thank you." That was the first time she'd ever heard about DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, a special kind of omega-3 found in fatty fish that's vital for brain structure. He explained that DHA helps keep brain cells flexible and well-connected, which becomes more important as we age and natural wear and tear begins to set in. He also mentioned that eating more fish might help slow down cognitive decline and preserve memory longer. Carol was intrigued. She wasn't looking for miracles, just a little more clarity and sharpness day to day. So she gave a try. At first, she kept it simple. Baked salmon with lemon and herbs. Sardines on whole grain toast for lunch. Grilled mackerel on top of a fresh salad. She discovered that these fish weren't just good for her, they were delicious. And more than that, she noticed something subtle shifting after a few weeks. She was finishing crossword puzzles a bit faster. Conversations flowed more easily, and she didn't lose her train of thought as often. She even felt more upbeat in the mornings, less foggy, more motivated to tackle the day. Carol began to research on her own, learning that omega-3s also reduce inflammation in the brain, which plays a major role in age-related decline. It was empowering to know that the food on her plate could have such a direct connection to her mind. And for someone who loved cooking, it gave her purpose. Each new fish recipe became more than a meal. It became a form of self-care. She talked about it with her book club, which quickly turned into a mini support group for healthy aging. They traded recipes and swapped stories about how their minds felt sharper, their moods more even. One woman said she no longer felt that 3 p.m. crash. Another admitted she'd forgotten to renew her crossword puzzle subscription because she wasn't skipping clues anymore. Carol even taught her grandson how to make salmon patties one weekend. He was skeptical at first, but ended up loving them so much he requested them the next time he visited. That night, they sat at the table, just the two of them, sharing stories and laughing over dinner. Carol noticed how present she felt. Focused, clear. It was like her mind wasn't just functioning, it was thriving. She kept it up. Twice, sometimes 3 times a week, fish became the centerpiece of her meals. It wasn't just for memory anymore. She felt it in her joints, her energy levels, even her skin. The benefits were everywhere, but most importantly, she felt more like herself. Years later, when friends asked her for advice about aging gracefully, she always smiled and said, "Start with what you eat, and start with fish." It became her signature tip, tucked between her gardening tips and her famous lentil soup recipe. She still goes to the market every Sunday. Pete, the fishmonger, now sets aside a piece of wild-caught salmon for her, wrapped and ready. Brain food for Miss Carol, he jokes. She laughs, tips her wide-brimmed hat, and wheels her little cart home, knowing that within those omega-rich fillets is something far more valuable than nutrients. There's clarity, independence, and the quiet power of choosing health, one meal at a time.